Kalam, the science of Kalam, which is the science of the creed. The scholar of Kalam is called Mutakallim. Mutakallim means theologian. In this context, Kalam here is theology. And the Mutakallim is the theologian. So, in some contexts, the one who talks about God's existence and his attributes, such as a philosopher, he's called a Mutakallim. Yani, you don't have to be a Sunni or a guided person to be a Mutakallim, someone who talks about theology and argues about theology. But then his kalam is the dispraised argumentation of the deviant factions, such as the Mu'tazila and the Likeners. In fact, Ahlul Sunnah was not originally known for kalam. And that expression was reserved for the deviants. At first, when they would say kalam, they meant the talk of the innovators, not the talk of the Sunni Muslims. But then, the word kalam and the practice of kalam, what's called kalam, yani, using kalam became inclusive of the Sunni Muslims too. And that expression, or this means that if our scholars of old needed to respond with evidence to something about confirming destiny, qadar, or any of the various cases concerning corrupted beliefs, they would merely answer from the Book of Allah and then from the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Meaning, in those old days, and there were way more scholars and way less or fewer deviant people, maybe a layman would encounter a deviant person, and then that deviant person would confuse him. So he'd go to a scholar and ask, and then the scholar would say to him, that's wrong, because Allah says such and such ayah. And the Messenger of Allah said such and such hadith, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then that's it. But then there appeared a group who called our evidence from the book ambiguous. And they left out using the hadiths altogether, claiming that they are rationally invalid. In other words, this is how the Sunni Muslims used to be, just giving answers from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And they always, since the time of the companions and the Prophet, they always had rational arguments, but fewer. They had less of a reliance on these rational arguments. But then there appeared a group that basically wanted to pull our proofs out from under our feet. They said, look at these guys. They don't want to engage in rational arguments. All they want to do is give you some ayats from the Quran and some hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these ayats, these are mutashabih in the first place. It's not even evidence. That's what they're saying about us. And these hadiths, they're not even valid. They're not even authentic. And they don't even have any rational arguments. So naturally, a group of our imams, may Allah have mercy upon them, engaged those deviants using their own approach against them. And this is how the good kalam of Ahlul Sunnah was born. Rational theological arguments. In fact, they had no choice. So this is like some history here. They clarified that all of what came in those hadiths was authentic. And correct in the mental judgment. All of what came in those hadiths was mentally sound also. And what those people claimed to be ambiguous in the book was not ambiguous. Yani, they defended their position. They said, no, these are not mutashabi ayat of the Quran. And no, these are authentic hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what they contain is rational, not irrational. The deviant beliefs are called ahwa, whims or desires. It is the plural of hawa. This is what Ash-Shafi'i meant when he said, Man irtada bil kalami la yuflih. Whoever dresses with kalam will not be successful. He was talking about the deviant kalam, not the kalam of Ahlus Sunnah. The people of desires made their reference their minds, not the book in the Sunnah. And they made their minds equal to the book of Allah. Then, when the Sunnah was conveyed to them with additional clarification for nullifying their lies, they discredited the narrators and turned away from the hadiths. So when you talk to someone, you need to be mindful. Some people, they have some cleverness. And what they can do is, when you're trying to make a point, they recognize what's the base of your point. So even though your point is sound point, these type of people, they can pinpoint the base of your argument, then they're going to try to pull the proofs out from under you. So this difference between nullifying your argument itself and nullifying the proofs of your argument. So some people, they will attack the proofs of your argument. And then if they do that, then what did they do? They attacked your argument also. So this is what we're talking about here. Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah originally were on the broader scale, just using ayat of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. They weren't using as much mental arguments until they had to, because they had to converse with people who were saying, this the ayah you want to use? You want to submit this ayah as proof? This is mutashabih ayah. This hadith not even authentic. That's all you have? You don't have any rational arguments? So they had to engage them like that. As for the people of the Sunnah, their school and the basic beliefs is built on the book and the Sunnah. And the only reason why some of the scholars dove into this issue with mental evidence was to debunk the way of those who claimed that the proper belief is not rational. Anyone who did not differentiate between the two matters and let his tongue dispraise Ahlus Sunnah for practicing ilmul kalam is ignorant about the reality of the issue. Meaning, some people, they just say kalam is bad, kalam is haram, kalam is philosophy, kalam is deviance and bid'ah. Imam Ash-Shafi'i dispraised the kalam. Imam Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he dispraised the kalam. So they're mixing something here, or they're missing something. So true is what the poet said. عَابَ الْكَلَامَ أُنَاسٌ لَا عُقُولَ لَهُمْ وَمَا عَلَيْهِ إِذَا عَابُوهُ مِنْ ضَرَرِي مَا ضَرَّ شَمْسَ الضُّحَى فِي الْأُفْقِ طَالِعَةً أَلَّا يَرَى ضَوْءَهَا مَنْ لَيْسَ ذَا بَصَرِي. It means some who lack intellect have dispraised the talk, yani the kalam. عَابَ الْكَلَامَ أُنَاسٌ. Some people have dispraised the kalam, the talk, the speech. أُنَاسٌ لَا عُقُولَ لَهُمْ. People who have no minds, they have no intellects, they are not intellectuals. وَمَا عَلَيْهِ إِذَا عَابُوهُ مِنْ ضَرَرِي. Though there is nothing against it if it were something that they did not like. There is nothing against the kalam, although they dispraise it. Their dispraising it doesn't harm it. مَا ضَرَّ شَمْسَ الضُّحَى فِي الْأُفْقِ طَالِعَةً. Not against the rising morning sun in the horizon is أَلَّا يَرَى ضَوْءَهَا مَنْ لَيْسَ ذَا بَصَرِي. Is the one who lacks vision, not seeing its light. If someone lacks vision and he can't see the light of the sun, then when the sun rises in the morning, this doesn't harm the sun. So just like that is the one who doesn't see the true good kalam of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah as good. It doesn't harm that kalam. It is not forbidden to present mental arguments, and sometimes it is an obligation. When At-Tahawi said, وَلَا نُمَارِي فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ, we do not dispute about the religion of Allah. This refers to the sinful dispute and does not mean that debate about the attributes of Allah is unlawful. The sinful dispute is when no truth is defended, or when debating to show off, or when asking a misguided person to confess his beliefs, which can be blasphemous. The one who knows the truth may defend it with arguments. So this is what a Wahhabi is going to do. Here, this talk is really for a Wahhabi. Yani, who are the people really intended by who's trying to debunk our proofs and say, those are mutashabi ayahs you use. Those are not authentic hadiths you use. That's the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila, they were saying, the Mu'tazila, those are the people who deny destiny and they deny the attributes of Allah, and they say that Allah cannot be seen, and they say other things. They say Allah has obligations and prohibitions. Those are the ones that they like to argue, and they're like philosophers. So they really don't care about the ayat of the Quran or the hadith. To them, really, it's their minds. They come up with some ideas, and then they'll bring ayat of the Quran to support their ideas. Those are the ones that pushed Ahlus Sunnah into having to have more reliance on rational arguments. But who are the people who would tell you, don't talk like this, don't use kalam at all? It's not the Mu'tazila. They like that. This is the Wahhabis, and people like the Wahhabis. In our time, it's going to be Wahhabis. In the past, it would be people like Wahhabis, people who liken Allah to the creations, because they are not intellectuals. On a religious scale, who are the intellectuals? On one side, you have people who are intellectuals, and on the other side, you have people who are not. Who are the people who are intellectuals? I don't mean guided. When I say intellectuals, doesn't mean guided. Who are the people who are intellectuals? Those are philosophers and atheists and Mu'tazila and Ahlus Sunnah. Ahlus Sunnah are intellectuals. And who are the people who are not intellectuals? Those are pagans. So your Christians and Jews and idol worshippers, including Hindus, and Wahhabis are in that group because they liken Allah to the creations. So when you argue with them, they say Allah descended down to the sky in the last third of the night, and He rose over the throne. And you tell them, but Allah existed before He created any place. They would say, you're using your mind. The hadith says such and such. The ayah says such and such. So those who would discourage you from using this kalam are the people who are not intellectuals. Wahhabis are the ones who are going to say, this is kalam you are talking. That's haram. And even if you talk to some Christians, they're not going to say kalam, but they're going to say, you're using your mind. This is beyond using your mind. We're talking about faith here. We believe in God who has the power to do anything. And they mean He can have a son and He can die and come back to life and things like that. So they're not intellectuals. They're not really interested in using rational arguments. Except sometimes some of those people, they try. Christians and Wahhabis, they basically are the ones who are tired of getting pulverized by rational arguments from people of all religions. Especially Christians. Christians are under attack by people from all religions, as far as, not talking about physical fighting. So they attempt to formulate some rational arguments. So sometimes they try.
The argument that the Christians make where they're saying like, oh, this is beyond like reason, this is faith, isn't God capable of doing anything? Isn't that the same argument the Wahhabis use when they say like, for example, if you tell them, when they say like Allah is on the throne or something like that, you say Allah existed before the throne, then they say, isn't God capable of doing anything? Isn't He capable of creating Himself in this situation or that situation? Is that the same argument?
Well, I don't usually find Wahhabis. I have seen some Wahhabis who say something like what you're saying. I don't usually find Wahhabis who would come out and say that Allah can make Himself be like that, which means He creates Himself. But they do believe that. That's really what they're saying, but they don't usually, in my experience, they don't usually come out and say, Allah can create Himself over the throne. Allah can create himself coming down, but that's really what they're saying though. But they do say Allah speaks if he wills, and he's silent if he wills. They don't realize that they're saying that Allah's speech is created by himself. They don't realize they're saying Allah creates his own speech when they say that. And that they're denying that it's eternal. What the Wahhabis will usually say, yani, how they express themselves, is they're usually just going to forward the matter to the religious texts. As opposed to saying, Allah can create himself that way. They would say, this is what's in the Quran. This is what's in the Sunnah. This is what the Salaf were upon. This is what the Prophet and his Sahaba were saying. That's how they do it. That's how they express themselves. But in meaning, they are saying that. So that's just like what a Christian would say too. A Christian would say, but this is what's in the Bible. There's a difference though, which is that the Christians are arguing from a perverted book. Wahhabis are not arguing from a perverted book. They're arguing from perverted interpretation. So, it is not forbidden to present mental arguments, and sometimes it is an obligation. When At-Tahawi said, وَلَا نُمَارِي فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ, we do not dispute about the religion of Allah. This refers to the sinful dispute and does not mean that debate about the attributes of Allah is unlawful. The sinful dispute is when no truth is being defended, or when debating to show off, or when asking a misguided person to profess his beliefs, which can be blasphemous, depending on what you're asking him. The one who knows the truth may defend it. He might be obligated to. This statement of his, of Imam At-Tahawi, does not refer to the use of ilmul kalam, when he said, we don't dispute in the religion of Allah, or about the religion of Allah. Nevertheless, Ash-Shafi'i, despite having mastery of kalam, he used to dislike delving into it for several reasons. 1. The origin is to abandon this and use evidence from the religious text, not the mind. That's our original stance. What does the Quran say and what does the Hadith say? A Wahhabi would lie on us and say, we make our minds our foundation. That's not true. We don't make our minds our foundation. The Quran and the Sunnah are our foundation, but they don't contradict the mind. And the reason the Wahhabi thinks that we are making our minds as our origin is because he doesn't even use his mind. He's just giving you ayahs that are misinterpreted and hadiths that are misinterpreted without thinking about them. So then when you think about it and say, no, how can this mean that Allah comes down in the last third of the night? So what if you're on the other side of the world then and it's daytime? So he's going to be up and they're going to say, A'udhu Billah, you're using your mind. So just the fact that we thought about it so that we doubted, we disputed what they said based on something rational, then in their perception, we gave priority to our minds. And also, a Shafi'i, he would refrain from that because making a mistake in these issues could lead to blasphemy. Yeah, and you have to be sharp in this field of theology because it's easy to commit blasphemy and you need to know how to speak. The science of the creed is the science that is most in need of precise statements, exact statements. If you don't know how to speak, you're going to say things in the wrong way. Then you might say blasphemy, or you might lead someone else to blasphemy. You might mean the right thing, but you don't know how to say it. And then you say something in a way that it's not worded right. Then the person who hears you will take the wrong meaning. And a Shafi'i saw that delving into this matter leads to tribulations. Lots of arguments, lots of fighting. However, though, regardless of that, there are some people who are built for that, and there's some people who are not built for that. So this knowledge of Kalam and these detailed arguments, it's not for everyone. Some people, it's enough for them, and if you teach people, you need to be able to recognize those ones. Some people, it's enough for them just to give them the basics only. Don't give them detailed arguments, because they can't handle it. One person came to Umar bin Abdul Aziz asking him about a religious case in Kalam. Here, I have it here in the footnote. Footnote number 104. Hafiz al-Bayhaqi said in his book, Shu'abul Iman, from the route of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, that a man asked him something about deviant beliefs. He's asking a question. He wants the answer. He wants clarity. So he told that man, go learn from the Bedouin boy in the school and abandon anyone else. He's saying to him, you see that little kid there? Go study religion with him. Go study Aqidah with that one. And don't sit with anyone else. So a Wahhabi will give you that and say, see, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he dispraises the Kalam too. He would rather that you sit with a little Bedouin schoolboy than to delve into the Kalam. But al-Bayhaqi explained this. Al-Bayhaqi said what Ibn Abdul Aziz said, and others among the Salaf also said. And it was only because they saw that there was no reason to go into Kalam to validate religion. For the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent with evidence witnessed by those who saw it and conveyed with authenticated transmission. That is enough to confirm monotheism and prophethood. In reality, the ayat of the Quran and the sunnah of the Prophet, it is enough. And they have the arguments in them. The ayat of the Quran, they have the arguments in them. And the sunnah of the Prophet has the arguments in them. We saw some of those proofs already. So it's enough to give someone an ayah or a hadith, and then the meaning that's in there, especially when he's a simple commoner, the meaning that's in there will touch him and he'll say, okay, and then he'll be satisfied. That is enough to confirm monotheism and prophethood. They did not feel safe for the people to delve into Kalam because the intellects of some fall short and their opinions are weak. In fact, the opinions of most people are weak. That's a fact. The opinions of most people are weak. Subhanallah, you see how's government set up here? The majority rules, right? So that's the way it's supposed to be. So they vote so that whoever the majority of people vote for will get into office. This is not a good way, really. Because most of the people, the vast majority of the people, their opinion is weak. It's few people that have strong opinion and they have sound outlook. Not most of the people. They would become susceptible to the misguidance of misguided people and the fallacies of atheists. And then they would be unable to escape, like a weakling who is not a proficient swimmer. If he fell into a strong current, it is feared that he drowned. It is feared that he would drown and be unable to escape. They did not forbid people from Kalam because it is dispraised in itself or because it is not beneficial. So what it's saying is, out of fear of some people, they don't have the minds to handle this topic. And they don't have the minds to handle a lot of arguments. So it's better not to give them those things. Sometimes some people ask me a question. Depends on who's asking me. I will just answer him yes or no, and that's it. And sometimes I won't answer him yes or no. Sometimes I'll give him an answer so that he thinks about what he's asking in the first place. He asks a question as if he really didn't think well about the question he's asking. So I won't give him a straightforward answer so that he thinks about the question he's asking. But other people, I won't do that. I'll just say yes or no. That's it. Because I don't think that I should do that with them. Well, I can't think of an exact argument that will confuse a person now. But we have some examples though. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Let me see here. So how would the knowledge by which one knows about Allah and His attributes and knows about the messengers and the difference between the truthful prophet and a liar be dispraised? It was their compassion for the weaklings that they would not reach their goal, that those weaklings would not reach their goal and then become misguided, that they forbade people from busying themselves with Kalam. Then Al-Halimi, may Allah have mercy on him, he encouraged learning Kalam so to be prepared to argue with deviant people. Yeah. Here, where it says, we said Ash-Shafi'i, he disliked delving into Kalam for several reasons. So we gave 3 here. 1, the origin is to abandon this and use evidence from the religious texts, not the mind. 2, making a mistake in these issues could lead to blasphemy. Here's a footnote. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Hakam, he said that Ash-Shafi'i said, if a man asks you anything about Kalam, do not answer him. He's talking about the bad Kalam. If he were to ask you about blood money, and you said a dirham or a daniq, he will say to you, you are mistaken. That's not the right payment for blood money. But if he asks you something concerning Kalam and you are mistaken, he will say, you blasphemed. And he saw that delving into this matter leads to tribulations. Here's a footnote. Footnote 106. Al-Rabi' said, I saw Ash-Shafi'i coming down the steps when there were people in a session talking about something concerning Kalam. Could be they were talking about destiny. That's a dangerous topic there. Some topics are more susceptible to confusion than others. Destiny is one of them. And seeing God is one of them. And the speech of God, that's one of them. He said, I saw Ash-Shafi'i coming down the steps when there were people in a session talking about something concerning Kalam. Ash-Shafi'i shouted and said, you either be neighbors in goodness or you leave us. Al-Bayhaqi narrated from the route of Al-Muzani. We were at Ash-Shafi'i's door debating about Kalam, meaning we were students. Ash-Shafi'i, he was our sheikh. We were at his door debating about Kalam. Ash-Shafi'i came out, heard some of what we were talking about, and then he went back in. And he did not come back out to us for 7 days. Then he came out and said, it was not sickness that prevented me from coming out to you. Rather, it was what I heard you debating about. Do you think I have not mastered it? I delved into it until I reached considerable depth. I never practiced anything but that I reached in it considerable depth. That's because Shafi'i was an alpha genius. He said, even archery, I used to shoot between 2 targets and hit the bullseye 9 times out of 10. Shafi'i saying, basically, and he's not bragging, I'm good at anything I do, and I'm good at anything I put my mind to. However, the Kalam has no extent. Debate about something that if you were mistaken about it, it would be said that you made a mistake. Do not debate about something that if you were mistaken, it would be said that you blasphemed. Al-Bayhaqi said, in the story of Al-Muzani about Ash-Shafi'i is evidence that he learned the Kalam and exerted himself in it. Yani, Ash-Shafi'i, he was a master at Kalam, and then he preferred to leave out debate when there was no need for it. So, particular examples not coming to me, but with experience, you'll see that. Inshallah, you'll talk to someone. You come to know, you'll say, this one, I think this one's not too bright. I can only go so far with this one. It's such a beautiful Muslim, nice brother, nice sister, very, very nice person, better than me. But I don't think this one is too bright, so I can't go into those things with that one. And then there's another one, you say, this one's good. I can give him loads of details.
Can I ask a question, Sheikh?
Yes.
For a person, you mentioned that some of the people are not intellectuals, and many of the Wahhabis, for example, are not intellectuals. Mm-hmm. For a person who is a good person, they're a good Muslim, maybe because they like you a lot, they would follow you, but they are not an intellectual person. How would you convince them of some of the things that we are talking about? Is my question clear?
I think your question is clear. I would, for whatever it is that I needed to convince him, Let's say I needed to convince him about something that is intricate. And I think that he's not intellectual and that I have to go slow with him. So then I would just break it apart, break it in pieces, and go with him slowly, step by step. And I would give him the first piece, and I would say, do you understand? If he doesn't understand, then I'll try again. If he doesn't understand after a couple times, then I'll tell him, well, this is what's correct is such and such. I advise you to take it and leave this issue alone. And if he can accept, if he can understand even after I repeat a few times, then I'll go to the next step, and like that. And if at any spot he gets stuck and he can't go further, I would tell him, well, you should know that what's correct in religion is such and such. So take that and relieve yourself. Wafiq. Thus, the application of this knowledge, the way to practice this knowledge, is to refer to the creations to prove God's existence and to prove his perfect attributes, as well as to refer to the religious texts from which the arguments are extracted. That's kalam, to bring rational arguments and also to bring the ayat and the hadiths to prove all your arguments. Sheikh Samir said that the kalam is centered around three things. Thinking about the creations to use that as evidence for the oneness of the Creator, the proofs of Ahlus Sunnah, and refuting the heretics. That's an important part of kalam. It's not there just so we can bounce intellectual arguments off of ourselves, off of each other. We did that so that we can refute the heretics and defend the religion. And the heretics are two groups here. Those who are affiliated with Islam and those who are not affiliated with Islam. The obligation of knowing this discipline would be either personal or communal. The personal obligation is knowing the fundamentals of the creed, like what's in Mukhtasar. The belief in Allah, the belief in the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, the matters with which the Prophet came, learning about the basic rules of blasphemy. All of that is a personal obligation. The communal obligation is to be able to confirm the matters of the Islamic creed with evidence, as well as to have the ability to refute the fallacies of the innovators and blasphemers, including the philosophers, with mental and textual evidence. We have a footnote here. Footnote 109. Benefit. How to mentally prove the validity of the religious matters whose realities cannot be proven mentally. That means we have in our religion some things, they have direct mental evidence. In particular, the belief that God exists and that he has attributes. We have immediate mental arguments for those. So we say, God has to exist because this world exists. If God didn't exist, this world wouldn't exist. So that doesn't require an ayah from the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That has a direct mental argument. But there are things that do not have direct mental argument. And really their immediate proof is from the revelation. Like that wine is haram. How do we know wine is haram? So we know wine is haram because it came in the revelation. So what if an atheist comes to you and says, prove to me that wine is forbidden? What are you going to say to him? If you tell him an ayah from the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet, he's going to say, I don't believe in your book. And then what are you going to say to him? Maybe you'll say, well, look, it's harmful. People get into car accidents and you can get liver cancer to liver and things like that. And but that's not really a strong argument. That it's haram, forbidden. He might say to you, it doesn't mean it's forbidden. Anything in excess can be harmful to you. Anything in moderate amounts, you cannot be harmed by that. So why you say is haram altogether? What if a person just has one wine glass per day? The doctors, in fact, they say this is good for you. So that's what he might say to you. So how are you going to prove to him that it's haram? So this is what we want to talk about here. How to mentally prove the validity of religious matters whose realities cannot be proven mentally. And before I start reading, what you should understand then from the introduction I gave you is that in order to prove that wine is haram for this atheist, you need an introduction. You need to establish something with him first. And then you go through some things, that's what we're going to read now. Once you get through step by step with him, then you're going to be able to prove it. So it is true that the mind is not the reference for knowing the religious laws. And the mind is not the reference for the aforementioned creedal matters that cannot be known except through hearing, like angels. You can't know about angels by your mind. We don't know that there's angels otherwise, without revelation. Or other things, enjoyment of the grave and torture of the grave and books of deeds and all of that. We don't know about those things by our minds. We have to only hear those things to know about them. So the mind is not the reference for them. However, this does not negate the fact that we can mentally establish the truthfulness of the laws and the creedal tenets. It just needs some premises, some steps that you're going to base your argument on. Such as the prohibition of wine and the existence of paradise and hell. The way to that can be achieved in 8 steps. These 8 steps, I took them from Dr. Wafi. He taught it to us. It is very important when explaining this case to clarify to the opponent that not every deduction is immediate. Meaning, 8 steps. So, imagine you said to this atheist, well, yeah, I can prove it to you in 8 steps. It's 8 steps. Come on, I don't have all day here. Why don't you make it 1 step? So it's important to clarify for an opponent that not every deduction is immediate. In other words, sometimes you'll be talking to a person. Don't tell them how many steps you need. But when you need some steps, and then you start taking your steps to get to your point, and then he says, get to the point. So you say to that person, sometimes some things need premises. Sometimes some things need introduction. You need to follow me for a minute. I need to establish some bases with you so that I can prove my point to you. Because, why is that important? Because you have to remember a very important thing. If you want to debate with someone about something, you don't debate with a person based on a disagreement. You debate with a person based on an agreement. Find where you agree with that person. You tell him, do you agree to this? Then if he says no, then don't argue with him there, because he doesn't agree from the beginning. You don't have an agreement. In other words, you need something that you can both go back to. That's what's going to decide who's right and who's wrong. So you need something that you agree to so that you can say, no, we already agreed about this. So that means you're wrong. But if you're in the first place, he says yes, you say no, and then he argues why he says yes, you argue why you say no, probably you're not going to get anywhere. You're just having a conversation. What's your point in debating with somebody? Your point is to convince them. So then you start from a point of commonality. Yes, you have a disagreement. That's why you're debating. But there needs to be something that you can both refer to. And then from there, you go. So, establishing the validity of the aforementioned cases in 8 steps is not a way to run away from the question, as an impatient atheist may say. It must be noted that some things are established in stages, especially since someone who does not believe in the existence of God would not believe that wine is unlawful. That's why you don't just say to the atheist, when he says, prove that wine is unlawful. You don't even believe in God. I'm going to start with you telling you why wine is lawful. How about I tell you that God exists? If he says, I don't want to argue with you about if God exists or not. I want you to prove to me that wine is unlawful. And then I might say to that person, I'm unable to do so. I'm not going to start here trying to. You're missing something in the first place. I'm unable to do so because you need to have something before that. You need to even know that God exists in the first place. So if you want, I'll tell you about that. If you don't want, then I'm not even going to have this conversation with you. Maybe. That's an option. Thus, there is no escape from establishing several premises. Here, the case will be summarized for the sake of brevity and for lack of repetition. For the points that will be mentioned are already spread throughout the book. Step 1, clarification of the causes of knowledge. It has already been established that there are 3 ways for the creature to achieve knowledge: sound senses, truthful information, and sound intellect. We talked about that. Maybe you'll start there with the atheist. Maybe you don't need to start there. You might need to start there. You say, in the first place, how do we even know something? Let's clarify how we even know something in the first place. We can know something by our sound senses, or truthful information, or the sound intellect. So you might say, no, I don't agree. Then you're not going to go further here. You're not going to try to explain to him how wine is haram, and he doesn't even agree how you can know something. So then you're going to stay here, and you're going to prove how you can know something by these ways: sound senses, truthful information, and sound intellect. Let's say he agrees with you. Okay, step 2, clarification that the world is an event, that the world has a beginning. Why you want to prove the world has a beginning? He wants to know how wine is haram. Because you're going to prove God exists by proving that the world has a beginning. To prove the validity of the divine laws, one must first prove the existence of God. To prove the existence of God, one must prove that the world is created. This can be achieved by proving that the world is made of masses and qualities. Yani traits, qualities which are traits or attributes. Meaning, how you prove the world is created. We're going to come to that, so I'm not going to go into details here. In a summarized way, you prove the world is created by saying, this world is made of bodies and qualities. There's trees, buildings, what else do you see? Cars, people, animals, clouds, sun. Those are all bodies. And they all have qualities. That's brick wall, that's hard. Clouds are soft, and leaves are green. The bricks are maroon, and like that. And the wall is smooth, and the bricks are rough. Those are all qualities. So everything in this world is either something that has volume, or it's a quality, an attribute. So what's your point? The point is, those are created and those are created. Things that have volume are created. And qualities are created. Now, he might want to argue with you about any of that. We'll come back to it, inshallah. So since those are created, it means then the whole world is created. And if the whole world is created, that means there's a creator. And the creator is not created. So this can be achieved by proving that the world is made of masses and qualities, and thus it is a creation in itself, as presented in detail in the coming section on existence. One may also prove that the world is created by nullifying the claim of beginningless events. Meaning, how can you prove the world is created? You can prove the world is created by nullifying the claim of a beginningless chain of events. What's that? Beginningless chain of events. Let's say if someone said to you, the world is not created, it's eternal. There was always this world existing. You weren't there to see when it was first created. You don't know that there was a first day. So you say to the person, it's like you're saying really that the world doesn't even exist. You say, huh? How is it like I'm saying the world doesn't exist? Tell him, because you're saying there was never a first day. You say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. You need to go back to school. Tell him, all right, I'll give you an example. What if I told you, I'll give you this, but I won't give it to you unless I gave you this before it. So if I give you this, then what else do you get? You get this one too, right? Okay. But what if I told you I won't give you this one unless I gave you this one first, before it? And I won't give you that one unless I give you this before it. And I won't give you that one unless I gave you this before it. And I won't give you that one unless I gave you this before it. And I won't give you that one. So if I keep going, what are you going to get? Nothing. You don't get anything. So you tell them that's what you're doing. You're saying this day, before it there was another day, and before it there was another day, and before it there was another day, forever with no beginning. So that means there was never a first day. So that's like saying we don't even exist. So the world has a beginning then. If the world has a beginning, that means there's a creator. That's nullifying the claim of a beginningless chain of events. We'll come back to talk about that, inshallah.
That's what continuous subject.
Yes. As explained in detail in the section pertaining to eternity. Step 3. Let's say you got past all of that. Step 3, proving the existence of the creator. If one can successfully prove that the world is created, then he can easily prove that it has a creator. Because every doing must have a doer. Every doing must have a doer. Okay, so let's say you did that. You proved that the world is created. Fine. Then once you prove that the world is created, then you're going to prove that it has a creator. MashaAllah, I talked to one atheist who told me that I proved that God exists. Once, when I talked to an atheist, and he told me, prove it. So I told him, if you have a rock, that rock has a shape. And it didn't give itself that shape. And it could have any other shape. So in order for it to have one shape over another shape, it had to be specified with that shape. So then, it needs a specifier. And everything that has a shape, it needs a specifier. And the one who specified it then shouldn't have a shape. So he said, congratulations, you proved the existence of God. MashaAllah. Step 4, clarification that God is the only creator and does not resemble created things. So, once you prove that God exists, you want to prove that he's one without a partner and he has no similar. If the opponent is not an atheist, then one can immediately skip to the 4th step. Step 4, clarification that God is the only creator and does not resemble created things. So steps 1 through 3 is when you're dealing with atheists. What if you're dealing with someone who does believe that God exists, but he doesn't believe in Islam though? And then he tells you, what's your proof that wine is forbidden? So you skip right to step 4. Clarification that God is the only creator and does not resemble created things. Because usually non-Muslims who confirm the existence of God, they liken him to the creations. Or they establish a partner for him. The evidence for the first case that God is the only creator is in the section of looks like this is reversed. It says the evidence for the first case is in the section of dissimilarity, and the evidence for the second case is in the section of oneness. It's the other way, the way it's worded here. The evidence for the first case that God is the only creator, that's in the chapter on oneness. And the evidence for the second case, the arguments for the second case, that he doesn't resemble created things, that's in the chapter on dissimilarity. Those are coming with details. If you looked ahead in the book and look at the table of contents, you'll see there's a section for the attributes, the 13 attributes. Step 5, proving the existence of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. To prove the validity of the religious laws and other matters whose realities can only be known through hearing, one must prove the validity of prophethood. Before proving the validity of the prophethood of Muhammad, one may need to prove his existence. And the evidence for his existence is tawatur, successive mass narration, which falls under the category of truthful information, as previously mentioned. If you studied the book, the information's there. We covered it already. Yani, you would have to prove the existence of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And step 6, clarification that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. You might not have to prove the existence of Muhammad. Person might know Muhammad exists, so you don't have to prove that. But you might have to prove that he was the prophet, though. And the way to prove his prophethood is to prove that he did miracles. That's why the chapter of miracles is a very important chapter in the science of the creed. Learning about the attributes and how to argue for those attributes, that's very important. And also learning about the miracles, how to define a miracle and how to prove a miracle. That's very, very important in the science of the creed, because that's how you're going to prove that Prophet Muhammad was a prophet. Alayhi salatu wassalam. Some of those miracles were conveyed. The way to prove his prophethood is to prove that he did miracles. Some of them were conveyed by tawatur, successive mass narration. And the details of clarifying that are in the section about miracles. We have in this book a section about miracles. That's why the book is called Outstanding Reference. It's a reference book. So should have something for whatever you need in the creed. You'll find it, inshaAllah ta'ala. Sometimes in detail, sometimes a little bit of information. Step 7, clarification that he is truthful about all that he conveyed. The proof that miracles establishes truthfulness is also mentioned in the section of miracles. Step 8, establishment of the truthfulness of the great Quran. By proving that Muhammad is truthful in all that he conveyed, one proves that the Quran is truthful. And therein, in the Quran, in that truthful Quran, is the confirmation of paradise and hell, as well as the prohibition of wine and other matters. And Allah gives the success. So where is really the prohibition of wine? It's in the Quran and in the hadith of the Prophet. So if you're dealing with a person who doesn't believe in the Quran or doesn't believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're not going to prove to him that it's haram by telling him it's in the Quran or the Sunnah. So you're going to need some premises. And that's a good lesson for you in general also. Yani, know that sometimes in some issues you need to back up, establish some premises, and then go forward again. So we said the judgment of learning this science is either a personal obligation or it's a communal obligation. This obligation is emphasized in our days because the people of misguidance are more prevalent than before. Today there is a need for mastering such argumentation. In fact, this was needed in the past, from before the days of Az-Zarkashi, and what came after that until today. Why it says that? Because Imam Az-Zarkashi claimed, may Allah have mercy on him, he claimed that before his time there wasn't a big need for Kalam. He lived a few centuries ago. Shaykh says, even before his time there was a need for Kalam. For Ibn Taymiyyah has revived tashbih, likening Allah to the creations, which includes making the speech of Allah something that recurs again and again. That's part of what Ibn Taymiyyah revived. In those days, there was a time when the people who likened Allah to the creations were like basically living under a rock, living in hiding. They didn't have a voice. They couldn't. Ibn Taymiyyah was a champion for those people who liken Allah to the creations because he had a lot of knowledge, because he had photographic memory. Imagine a Wahhabi with a photographic memory. That would be so harmful. Subhanallah. Despite that, he says that it is confirmed for the self of Allah, the speech of Allah. He says it's confirmed for Allah, even though it starts and stops according to him. His followers have not abstained from this, to the extent that some of them, even in this time, they have said that the speech of Allah is eternal by its kind, but it's an occurrence in its components. The Wahhabis, they say, until today, they say, Allah speaks when he wants and he stops speaking when he wants. So they don't realize they're attributing to him a created attribute. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdihi.